Welcome back to another Boilers Extra. I'm Nathan Baird from the Indianapolis Star.
Sam King from the Journal and Courier.
Sam, I don't know if you are familiar with the concept of a Murphy bed. Do you know what a Murphy bed is?
No.
It's a bed that folds into the wall.
Okay,
And
yes.
the house that we bought in Indianapolis, we moved back here last summer, had one in the guest room. And that's what I'm using right now because our Murphy bed folds into a desk, actually, which is even better than just folding into a wall. However, I'm always very paranoid. It's just going to come crashing down on top of me as I record one of these. So if that does happen, make sure you get it out to the world posthumously for me so people can see the funniest sports podcast moment of all time. But things are not crashing down on Purdue. Things are going very well for Purdue. The commitment today of Omer Mayer, I'm going to pronounce it Mayer. I think that is correct. I have not spoken to him yet personally to clarify that. But a 6'4" guard from Israel playing in the Euroleague right now. This had been a rumored move for the last couple of weeks, and it was just a matter of getting things finalized. And as you looked at the things that Purdue needed this offseason, I don't know that this particular kind of player was a big hole that was there, right? But I also think he may be a I don't better is better the right word version of some things that Purdue already had, or at least is such a talent that you can't, if you have the option to add him, cannot pass that up.
Yeah, very much so. And according to Purdue Basketball SID Chris Foreman, it's Omer Mayer. So,
Meyer. Okay.
um,
See,
but
that's I was really hoping. I wrote a lot of words so far about this guy, and I have not accidentally said Oscar Meyer, but his name being Omer Meyer is going to make it even worse. But go ahead.
uh, yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Purdue was good in the backcourt with Braden Smith, with Fletcher Lawyer, Jakari Harris, CJ Cox, Anton West coming in. But if you get a chance to add a player of this caliber, and you have a team that looks like it's going to be very good and can potentially get better, I think Purdue's kind of in an all hands on deck, like a potential national championship type season, if everything goes right. And you want to add every piece that can help you get there. And clearly, getting a guy who I believe has 2 years of pro experience overseas. So his
Yeah.
stats aren't that great, but he's playing against grown men as a 17 and 18-year-old.
Yeah, I mean this EuroLeague is not the NBA, but it is the highest level of competition in Europe, and that's where Trevor Williams is a teammate of his right now. This is big boy basketball. This is grown a man basketball that he is playing, and the way those work, these club teams, you play for developmental teams, and you usually will get some time with the main team. And Mayer last year became the youngest player in that program's history to score a basket. I think he was only 17 at the time. So it's still important experience. And you could just look at him and see that this is not, I think, your typical 17, 18-year-old. Like, it looks like there's some physical development there that he probably had to have to be able to play against guys of that age. But before we get into what he is and what he has and what he does, I want to start here just because I think you touched on something interesting, which is, last season, while it had the potential for great things, I mean, just look at how close they came to beating Houston and where Houston was able to get within a whisper of winning the national championship. Like, there was great promise available for this roster, but also probably just more volatility in what this roster could accomplish. I think next season, being the last season for Braden Smith, the last season for Fletcher Lawyer, the last season for Trakoff and Wren, there was definitely a sense around this team, and it starts with bringing in Oscar Clough, but a sense for Matt Painter, and we heard it in the way he talked immediately after the Houston game, I thought, which was, we've got, I have to go do what it takes to maximize the potential of this team, because last year, even though there was potential, you could call it a transitional year, right? From Zach Edey to when the other guys were going to be in their 4th/5th years. This is not a transitional year. I mean, the program will transition out of whatever happens this year, but this year is about an opportunity, and adding Mayer seems, it gives you the best of both worlds. But first and foremost, for what this team can be, it makes those aspirations even more realistic.
Yeah, and we don't know where this all fits in yet, and probably sometime in June, July, when we get a chance to see Purdue operate a little bit and get a chance to talk to Matt Painter, we'll get a better idea of what Purdue sees with this group. But just from our vantage point, I think definitely it is another weapon, which is when you're trying to win a national championship or go to the Final Four, and you're a team that's is probably one of the favorites to do so. All the firepower you can get, the better. And what I think it adds most importantly is another guy who can handle the ball, just based off of the film you've seen. And listen, Jakari Harris did at times, CJ Cox did at times, but I think they're kind of two guards who are also able to handle the ball and bring the ball up. Whereas Omer seems like he's more of a natural point guard, and he's 6'4", which is something that Braden Smith is not, and can, seems like he can shoot the ball, can pass the ball, can defend a little bit. So you're getting a very well-rounded player who, as we mentioned, has been playing against men for the last couple of years. So it certainly is something that is an added piece that can help you get over the hump of whatever hump you're trying to get over, which in this case is, in Purdue's case and historically, is getting that national championship banner.
Yeah, it's the one thing that Braden Smith is not and can't do anything about. He's not 6'4", and he won't be. But there's obviously a lot of other things he does at an elite level. And as we talk about what Mayer is and does and what he brings, if you go on the internet right now and look at his highlights, it's a typical highlight reel. I remember us mentioning this when we were talking about, it might have been Oscar Clough, where a highlight reel is exactly that. Here's all of the things that somebody does, and so many of them are centered around, here's a shot he made, here's a basket he made. And Mayer has a reputation for being an elite shooter, a big-time scorer for his age level. The thing that jumped to my attention most, though, when I watched him was some of his passing, some of the assists he could get. It wasn't just passing technique. It was having some sense of, I'm going to say he's Braden Smith-like, but that trait of having confidence and taking a risk, but having the confidence that the risk is worth it and you can make that pass. I mean, we saw that. I think he had like 7 assists in 19 minutes in the Hoop Summit game against the USA players. And one of them was this: he's a right-handed guy. He takes his left hand and just whips this ball into the post for a basket, kind of through some traffic or past some guys. Like there are some impressive passing things on tape for this guy. And when you look at what Purdue, I think, most wants to be, Matt Painter made a point many times about how he wants the best guys taking the most shots. That's why there was a high volume for Braden Smith, a very high usage volume for Trakoff and Wren. Fletcher Lawyer was third in line, and then everybody else kind of filled in. But they also like the idea of, when teams try to take away Braden Smith, what's your counterpunch? I think this is your counterpunch.
Yeah, and another guy, you're mentioning some of these passes looking like Braden Smith. When I saw some of these assists that he was getting, the first name that came to my mind was Jason Williams. People probably was White Chocolate from the NBA and played at Florida in the late 90s. But it's a guy who will thread the needle, and sometimes that's going to be a turnover, but sometimes you're going to make a pass that nobody sees coming. And some of these are, you can definitely tell the confidence is there. Seems like he's a pretty good shooter, but again, this is watching highlights of him making a bunch of shots. So if you get a guy who don't want to say he is Braden Smith, but he's got a lot of similar traits, kind of a similar skill set, and is 4 or 5 inches taller. I think, this is the reason Purdue went out and made this signing, was to get over the top. It wasn't because Purdue was going to be a bad team without this. Purdue was still going to be probably a top 3 or 4 team in the country going into next season regardless. And now I think this vaults Purdue to, maybe in the outsider's eyes, at least winning the offseason, which is not typically what you want to win. You want to win the big thing at the end, but this can help you get there.
I want to put a pin in that and come back to it, the winning the offseason. Make sure I don't forget to bring that up later, because I think that's what we can close on. It's just interesting to watch someone with his skills, because I think you said it right, that Jakari Harris, CJ Cox, like, they did some of this last season, bring the ball up. There were times when Purdue would move Braden off of the ball because teams were scheming so much to sort of contain him, take him out of it. And also it gives him a little bit of a mid-game break without taking him out of the game, right? Like it lets him catch his breath, and they would only do it for maybe a trip or two down the court. But I'm thinking now, like, what if you can still run that high pick and roll, short roll stuff with Trey Coffin-Wren and Omer Mayer now, but also Braden Smith is still on the floor. Like things like that start to get really intriguing because of the things it's going to open up for PJ Thompson to sort of play around with and come up with even more creative ways. Like this was already looking like a very prolific, potentially offense on paper. It was for most of last season. That wasn't really the thing that was ever holding them back. Usually it was offense. But the two additions that they've made, putting Clough on the floor and having it be more of a true ultimate size at center for a lot of minutes a game with Daniel Jacobson coming back, and then putting someone like Mayer in the mix who isn't just someone who can handle the ball, but who actually might be destined to be a point guard. I think those are I'm really intrigued to talk to PJ about this because I think he's probably pretty excited right now about where he can let his mind take this.
Yeah, and he's been regarded as kind of this offensive mastermind, which is why he's as young as he is, and given the freedom to call Purdue's offense. Matt Painter isn't just going to give anybody that distinction. So PJ Thompson, a guy who is a former point guard, is now probably can add a lot more things to the playbook, or just with through a motion offense what these guys can do, because he said before, listen, if you're not one of the top 2 or 3 guys, there isn't really a set play for you to get a shot. And Matt Painter said this too, like you might get 1 or 2 opportunities run for you a game, you better take advantage of it. Well, now you have potentially 5 guys who you can run something for. And that, gives you a whole bunch of flexibility depending on how teams defend you. In the last couple of years, last year, not a knock against Caleb First, but he was, an offensive liability probably. The year before, I think Ethan Morton probably fell into that to some degree, where they were guys on the floor to help you defensively. And if they gave you offense, it was a bonus. And now you have possibly a lineup that can score from any position and score, really double figures from any position.
I think that's a great point, that the idea that you're now taking it, there aren't going to be very many scenarios where you look at the 5 people that they have on the floor and think there's an offensive drawback in there somewhere. We haven't gotten to see Daniel Jacobson's full potential, but it looked really good when it started last season. And we know what he can be as far as a potential perimeter player, in addition to being a 7'4" tall human being. Trey Coffin-Wren, that's already been proven. Fletcher Lawyer, Braden Smith, all those guys are proven. And CJ Cox and Jakari Harris at spurts last year were very proven too. And then you start talking about people like Benter or Jack Benter, I should say, and Antoine West Jr., who you mentioned. Like it starts to be, you can go really deep with guys who are accustomed to scoring the ball. And I'm sure I probably just forgot somebody in that whole rundown. But from a shooting perspective, you look at his numbers, and you mentioned the numbers in the Euroleague, and there aren't that many games to choose from. That's a pretty small sample size. If you look back over the past 4 years in their under 18 tournament, he's shot something like 83 pointers. He's only shooting like 25%. There's some numbers there that do not belie his, or do not mesh with what you see on film. Because when I watch him on film, it's a very smooth shot. It's a very quick release. And again, it's the highlight reel thing, but he's taking some shots from aggressive depth. He looks like a really high upside shooter to me.
Yeah. So what somebody texted me earlier today is Carson Edwards. And I said, like, listen, Carson Edwards would get on some absolute heaters and go scorched earth. But at times he would go out and shoot very poorly.
Oh, I know. I was there for that.
And you have to
I was in on the ground floor of the Carson Edwards experience. Both good and bad.
I don't know if he's to that degree. He definitely looks like he probably defends better. But when you're talking about those, those Eurobasket U18 types of games, he, despite the shooting, he averaged a lot of points, and he had high assist and high rebound numbers. So he gives you a collection of statistics that if he's not scoring, he still helps your team win. And I think that that's probably where he's a good fit for Purdue, is they don't just want to one-trick pony. Purdue needs guys, especially as we saw last year, who can help rebound. Oscar Clough should help you with that. But if you can get a guard who rebounds like Braden Smith does at times, even better.
By the way, and again, I think context is important for all this. I just quoted you these U18 tournament numbers. He's only 18 now. So some of those numbers, he was really young and playing against much older competition. And that, it's something that's been pushing his game for a while, I think, to get to the stage that it's at now. But when you go look at the highlights, I don't think the highlights lie necessarily. And he's not going to be as high volume of a shooter as Carson Edwards was later in his career from the beginning, simply because those shots belong to other people first and foremost still in this offense. But I think that what he has shown is that when the rest of this offense is clicking and those opportunities come to him, which they should, I think it's going to be a really tough team to match up with for a lot of opposing defenses. Imagine all the teams that last year were doing everything they could to take Fletcher Lawyer out of the mix and now put someone like Mayer on the court, or frankly, put even second-year CJ Cox and Jakari Harris. Like, there was already upside there. And so now it's just one more option. And when they take Fletcher Lawyer out of the game, now maybe it's Mayer that's in the game instead. Like, you can see where it kind of builds upon itself as to the ramifications of this. You mentioned defense. I have watched some highlight clips of him defensively, getting some steals and things like that. I think he's just coming into, number one, again, that we talked a lot last summer going into the season about how CJ Cox impressed by the way, and Jakari Harris, maybe even more so, like came in and just looked the part right away. Like, oh, that guy doesn't look like a freshman walking in here. Like, he came in, and then Jakari Harris also went and got that international experience with the Mexican team that I think opened his eyes a little bit to playing against grown men. And this is a guy who's not going to come in and be intimidated, I don't think, by the physicality of the Big Ten. Not that maybe European basketball is as physical in some ways, but just, again, the having to play up that level, that age level, beyond just an age level, is, I think, good preparation for getting your kind of mind right coming into trying to assert yourself in the Big Ten.
Yeah, and I would imagine that before he made this decision, he was on campus this weekend, I think. Before he made this decision, I would hope that he talked to Travion Williams and Carson Edwards, who's in the same league, and said, hey, what am I getting with this program if I go there, and what should I be ready for? And I would imagine that, he's pretty educated about what he's signing up for here. He's not coming in kind of blind and just saying, hey, basketball's basketball everywhere. I think he's going to be pretty well prepared for what kind of adjustments he'll have to make. First of all, going and living on a college campus and going to classes, and also just the expectation of what Matt Painter and his staff want from their players.
You mentioned earlier, I didn't forget it, the point of winning the offseason. It's so much now in college sports, winning the offseason is about who did you get through the transfer portal? Who did you lure away from somewhere else? Who did you buy from a lower level who has been a star that's going to come up and do something for you now, or from a lower level, even power conference team, second division, and is going to come up and like be the guy for you now? And, Purdue has done that. They went and got Oscar Clough to be the number one rated by some people guy in the portal. But then at the same time, this is a much more conventional way still of building a roster. You're getting a guy who, regardless of what he does for you this year, is a potential central piece in the next stage of Purdue basketball. Because when Smith and Lawyer and Kaufman-Renn are all gone after this season, and Clough is gone after this season, you're going to need someone to, and even though you've got a lot of guys still with experience, I think you need someone to kind of be the lead guy and really take charge on the floor. And this seems like this guy is filling that need too. It won't be the role he has to assume often, if at all, this year, right, but it's a role that I think he's accustomed to through his experience, and a role that he can take immediately once that 2025-26 season ends.
Yeah, for the future of Purdue basketball, long term, getting to play a year with Braden Smith is probably the best thing for somebody transitioning from Euro basketball to United States college basketball, because you're getting the probably the best guard in college basketball, that you get a whole season to pick his brain about everything and why'd you do this, why'd you do that, and then you take all that knowledge into your second year of college basketball when the senior class is gone, and you start to impart that wisdom on down and then use it to your own advantage with a new group of guys. So this is definitely, probably a great long-term solution for Purdue, which also gets Luke Ertl, a dynamic scoring guard, who's going to be in the next freshman class, to partner with all of that. So I think Purdue is definitely is all eggs are in the basket for this coming year, but this seems to have some long-term roots to it.
This isn't probably the last move that Purdue makes. I think they are still looking for the one thing they need, which is need is an interesting word, I suppose. But the one thing that just on paper is missing is what Cam Heide would have been, what Miles Colvin maybe would have been, which is that, 3-and-D kind of guy, or a 4, like a 3-4 combo forward. There have been some names that have been in the mix. Some of them gone on to other places. Liam Murphy from North Florida is one that has just come out in the last, I don't think, 48 hours or so, started as a potential guy that is in the mix here. And I think what has been tricky for them is they've been very judicious about this, because this is a trickier hole to fill, especially because of everything else they're doing. They're not going to ask someone to come in and play 25 to 30 minutes a game. Hence why Cam Heide partially and Miles Colvin are no longer in this program, right? They need someone who's willing to come in and do the things that those guys would have done and be okay with the minutes that will most likely only be available for that. And then you get into all the other things, the cultural fit of what Purdue is looking for. And they're always very careful about that, more careful than some programs are. So I think that has made this a little bit of a tougher piece. And they've been in on some other guys. There was one player I had heard, it was told it was going to be coming in for visit, and then called and said he was going somewhere else. Like that. But I do think they probably will end up adding someone there, just because I think it is an important piece of roster balance potentially. I mean, Benter is a 6'4" guard who can do some of those things, but if you can get a more experienced player to come in and be great, be fine with taking that role for a run at what Purdue potentially can accomplish next season, that will be perfect. It's just a matter of finding that guy.
Yeah, Purdue is. And we haven't mentioned Riley Burgess, so that's a guy.
I did. I told you I was forgetting someone before. Obviously,
yeah, that's another guy with some front court help that can play the 4, can play the 5, gives you some flexibility. But I think you're absolutely right. Like, the guys that Purdue is going after are guys who have had some success at the lower level, and what Purdue is selling is, do you want to compete for a chance to go to the Final Four and win a national championship with a lesser role? And if you can get a guy that scored 16 points a game at a lower level, who, like Lance Jones did it a year ago, says, I've scored a ton of points in college. Now I want to go try to win a championship. Then Purdue might be a good place to go do that.
I'll make sure. I apologize for forgetting Raleigh Burgess before, and he can definitely do wing things. That's what makes him a really intriguing front court player. I just don't know if defensively that's what they're missing more, is that defensive matchup in some ways. Can you get a 6'7", 6'8" guy who can rebound, who can match up and switch onto guards more easily maybe than Burgess can? I think that's where that comes into play. But it's just the one, as you're looking, as kind of what we started talking about at the start of this, when you're trying to put together sort of the perfect roster, you're trying to leave no stone unturned and fill every hole, whatever phrase you want to use. That would seem like the last one that's hanging out there. And it could be relatively soon, I think, that they find someone, because the portal's been open for a while now. I think they know who most of the available options are. And if they can find the person who checks those boxes, and again, I think accepting the role as it looks right now on paper is an important part of that, then I could see them adding someone else. And then that as we've already seen, I mean, people are already ranking this team top 3 at worst, top 5, but usually top 3 going into next season. And the expectations are going to be high. I think I wrote something today about, the potential is massive, and the expectations might be even bigger.
Yeah, very much so. And, when we talk about the players who have come in, Oscar Clough was a need. and Omer Mayer was a want, and now anything beyond this is really just kind of additional firepower that's, like you said, can plug whatever shortcoming you may have left on this roster. But I don't want to get into calling this a super team or something, but it seems like Purdue has kind of filled everything that it felt that it had to fill to give this team the best chance to compete for the grand prize next season. And it realizes it gets one more run with Braden Smith, Fletcher Loyer, and Trey Kaufman-Renn, who have started a ton of games together. And in the case of those two guards, have started every game of their college career together.
I think it's also, you have to have contingencies. Like, you can't leave yourself, last season, Matt Painter, he said it during the NCAA tournament, like, hey, I thought, we had the roster as long as we didn't suffer a catastrophic injury, and then bang, 1 minute in the second game, you don't have any rim protection. You don't have functional size. And I think adding another wing to this mix, just it's layering in some of that protection, right? So that if you do have to go a stretch without someone, especially from a defensive standpoint, you've got that matchup covered in the long term. So that's just something I would keep an eye on. We'll obviously keep reporting on that, jconline.com, indystar.com. Sam, I'm curious here, because you've been here through this whole stretch. I had my sabbatical for a little while, but it's maybe too early to tell because we're only in April. But the anticipation that existed between the 2023 season and the start of 2024, I'm sorry, between 2022 and the start of 2023-24, if you know what I'm saying. Like, the anticipation of coming off of a 1 seed with everybody coming back, even though there was the loss. Mm-hmm. How would you compare what that anticipation felt like to what is the anticipation that's sort of building right now?
I think they differ mainly because that loss to Fairleigh Dickinson, which in terms of point spread was the biggest upset in the history of the NCAA tournament. And knowing that entire team, which I thought most of that season had overachieved and got itself to a 1 seed, won a Big Ten title, won the Big Ten tournament, and had the National Player of the Year. And pretty much all that team is coming back. There was definitely the idea that team could win a national championship, but the whole narrative in that offseason was people who aren't around the team every day or at all the practices and availabilities. They came, and that was the narrative that just seemed to carry on throughout the year. Yeah, but last year Purdue lost to a 16 seed. And that really fueled Purdue, and to the point where the guys on the team just stopped acknowledging that at all. Like, you couldn't ask them about it. And for those of us who are around all the time, it became kind of like a joke, like, oh gosh, here we go again. Somebody new coming in to ask about Fairleigh Dickinson, and you kind of see the players roll their eyes, and they knew they had to, as Matt Painter said, sit in it. Like, you were going to have to answer those questions until you answered those questions, and it very much did. And going into that tournament with what Purdue did the following season, I think that's when the anticipation came, was like going in as a 1 seed again. People started to say, hey, Purdue. And there were still people that were like, oh, Purdue always loses to a double-digit seed. Grambling's going to knock them out in the first round. But there were a lot of people who were realistic that said, this Purdue team is built to win a national championship. And now I think you're getting that here in April versus, early in the following season, when you see that team come out and just run through everybody it was early on. I think the anticipation is basically, 5-6 months sooner than it was for that run.
Yeah, I think there's 2 ways to do it. Like, you can either just catch lightning in a bottle and go on an NCAA tournament run. We've seen some teams do that, a Final Four run. NC State did that 2 years ago. Like, that was lightning in a bottle. Or you can do what, frankly, all 4 of the teams that made the Final Four did this year, which was build a Final Four roster and then go out and execute a Final Four season, which is what, again, Purdue did that 2 years ago. And that seems to be what they're trying to pull off, obviously, this year. And it goes back to, again, what we talked about at the start. Like, Matt Painter knows that there are every team that they've taken this to where every year they have a team that is good enough that if you get in the tournament and the right things happen, they could do that other thing. They could make that run no matter what their seed is. Came pretty close to making a similar run this year, right? But he knows that the other thing is attainable this year, that this could be a really loaded roster of really experienced guys and really talented guys. And this was just another aspect of trying to maximize that. So it'll be interesting to watch here in the coming months. come back to Boilers Extra. Next time they have an edition, we'll probably throw another edition of Boilers Extra at you. 2 different spellings there of that similar sounding word. I'm Nathan Baird. He's Sam King. Talk to you later.